Welcome to another episode of Executive Sessions, where we discuss trends and developments in the industrial manufacturing space. I'm your host, Clayton Gollett, and we've got an awesome show lined up for you. Today, we'll explore innovation, commercialization, and scaling in manufacturing. Our guests share how to bring a product or a concept to life, focusing on user needs, while we discuss the role of original equipment manufacturers. OEMs for short, projecting and protecting proprietary tech and defining your product's value. So let's kick it off. Our first guest, Mr. Steve Myers. He's got a bit of a lengthy background, but he's got an extensive history which will make him unlike anything we've had on the show. Steve Myers, a seasoned operations leader with over 41 years of experience at Parker Hannifin, where he held various senior roles, including plant manager, business unit manager, and vice president of operations for the Motion Systems Group. During his tenure, he led multiple divisions and acquisitions, developed over 20 general managers, and contributed to Parker's global strategy. Steve also completed executive development programs at Wharton and Parker's Leading and Managing Change Initiative. Since retiring in 2022, he serves on the boards of PVI for MiddleGround Capital and Quality Control Corporation. Whew. Steve, you've got quite the intro. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Clayton. That's awesome. Really looking forward to the show today.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited to see what information you bring, and I'm also excited to kind of pick your brain as well. And then our other guest, he needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. We're excited to welcome back the co-founder and managing partner of MiddleGround Capital, John Stewart. He's also got a massive, massive title, but if I go through all that, well, that'll probably kill the whole episode. So, John, welcome back, man.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, man, I've missed you.
Finally in one place for an hour. It's great.
Yeah, I know, man. I guess that's the last time I saw you actually had hair, but you left and... well, it all fell out. I was so sad. I missed you so much.
Well, you have the hat now, so.
I do. It's really warm now.
Yeah.
Well, you guys ready to kick it off?
We're
ready to go.
All right. Well, let's dive in. I always feel like if you ever watched Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, the lights come down, the music starts. I feel like we need something like that at the beginning of the show. Dun, dun. Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Yep. Welcome, and here we go. Steve, talk us through one of your innovations. Specifically, where did the inspiration come from, and how did the idea evolve from there?
Thank you, Clayton. Certainly. So as you look at innovation, I mean, it's a critical factor in any company that's trying to grow its revenue and EBITDA. And at Parker, as you alluded to, in your introduction of a number of things there, talking about OEMs and end users, how do you create value or make money for those folks, right? At the end of the day, any innovation has to take care of a pain point or answer an unmet need. And we always use that, we're division focused and product focused. So an example I'll give you would be of a zero turn radius mower. And we would go then to the marketplace and say, hey, that's one of the top markets for our low speed, high torque motors. And in the evolution of those zero turn radius mowers, which they make millions a year, they've taken over for the garden tractor. But typically, the way that we'd approach it at Parker is we would go out and interview the OEMs that manufacture these units, as well as end users, to understand what unmet need would they have, or what type of pain points do they have? Is it warranty? Is it speed? What may it be? So in the turf industry, what we were identified with the customers or the end users was cogging. So when a motor slips, you're going to get a skid mark in your yard, and $2, $3, $4, $10 million houses don't love to see those skid marks in their beautiful manicured yards.
I would say not.
The other pain point would be is, if I'm an end users having to make an oil change, right? Because it's time off the thing. Another end user feature would be speed. I can cut more grass. Efficiency, get more miles for the fuel, right? Because they want to stop and make money. So Parker would send out a number of engineers as well as commercial people to do those interviews. So then what we would do is take that through a detailed winnovation process, process of taking the ideas, the needs that you heard from the OEMs and the users, and then release the product if you have a product. But I don't want to go through the entire process right now because we'll probably cover that later. But essentially, the end solution ended up being we did two things. One is we coupled a piston pump with a hydraulic motor and created the efficiency and the speed, which would allow the end user to get more power to the deck, which made the cutting really level. Secondly, we used the low speed, high torque motor, which created a process, an innovative process for our rotors and stators so that there would be no cogging. And the third thing we did is we partnered with an oil company and created a patented oil that never needed to be changed for the life of the machine.
Wow.
So that was the kind of the big solution. We'll go through the process later because it's a very detailed process, but I think it's worth covering from a high level. So how's that sound, Clayton?
I think that sounds it's pretty good.
But you got to, you got to go to the user and the OEM because they have both different. And then you're going to make and save them money, whether it be you're growing the revenue or whether you're growing the EBITDA or whether you're doing both. And some of that money is going to be shared three ways between Parker, between the OEM, and between the end user.
Well,
the value that you create.
It definitely seems like a major key is starting backwards, like going to the end and then working your way back at that point.
You have to. You cannot. I mean, in most cases, you can't. I mean, we're not the iPhone guys.
Right. At least not yet. No, I'm just kidding. John, I have a question I've wanted to ask you for a long time. One of the innovations that we know that you've developed is the labor planning tool. What is that? And then what makes it proprietary?
So the labor planning tool is just a effective way to make sure that you have the right amount of labor based on the plan for the facilities. I wouldn't really call it proprietary. I mean, we basically stole it from Toyota when we left, and that they had an efficiency tool that we used, and we just incorporated it for these smaller companies and these smaller businesses to be able to use in their facilities. And if you can imagine, in manufacturing, one of the largest costs that you have is labor, indirect labor, direct labor, SG&A in the organization, and understanding what the right level of labor needs to be based on fluctuating demand. There's very few industries where the volumes that need to be produced are steady state and are reliable month after month.
Okay.
We were just talking about lawn equipment, which is seasonal, and so you don't sell a lot of lawnmowers in the wintertime, right?
No.
So people are buying snow blowers and different kind of devices and things. So as you plan production, you have to think about the products that you're manufacturing, and you have to be able to adjust the labor content so that you can control the cost inside the organization, and you have to do that in a way that protects the long-term employment of the employees. And so there's overtime as a tool that you used, and any temporary labor, efficiency improvements in the factory. And so it's just really it's the basis of which all plant management starts, is understanding the effective utilization of the labor.
How do you determine the core value proposition of an idea and how it addresses like the current market gap?
Yeah, I agree completely that you have to solve a problem. That's a lot of it. A lot of our companies and a lot of owner operators, they're really focused on today, what's happening today. And especially if they have like really strong business or really strong performance and reliable customers and have had a relationship for a long time, but at some point the products that you're manufacturing today are going to become less and less relevant, and so you have to have innovation of what's the next thing, what's the next generation of product, what's the it always, everybody kind of commonizes around costs because everybody always loves the lower cost. That's always a benefit that you have over time. but also finding innovative solutions for the customers and what the products are doing. And the example of the zero turn radius lawnmowers is a really good one, because 30 years ago it was all little small riding lawnmowers, that Sears, Craftsman, and John Deere and
John Deere,
Murray
Cub
and
Cadet.
Yeah,
Cub
Cub
Cadet,
Cadet.
all these guys were had, and then the zero turns came out and really started on the industrial side, and then just have really taken over the market. And there's been a lot of innovators in the market as well that have come in, new entries like Bad Boy Mowers and
Absolutely,
people
yeah.
like that have built up whole brands around those zero turn radius. So innovation is a catalyst for change and improvement, and you absolutely have to be solving a problem, and you have to be in the field to do that. It's another good point you brought up, why you have to kind of start at that end, because even at Toyota, when we would develop new vehicles, if the engineers are just focused on the needs that Toyota has, then you're not capturing all the opportunity. You got to think about the needs that the customer has. Like you get in a car today, and so what are some of the features you take for granted, like cup holders, and storage space, inside the vehicle. And those aren't really things that benefit the car company, right? Those are things that benefit the end consumer. So you have to understand how the products are being used, what are the problems, what are the issues, and that's usually where innovation comes in, is trying to solve a problem.
Just to add on to John's point, that oil example is pretty clear, right? What would happen is you would lose time in the field, and most lawn companies are quite small, right? Family-owned businesses. So it's critical, right, to not lose any time. Secondly, when you go to change the oil, you interject contaminants, right? If not done properly, now you create further downtime or warranty related issues. So by working with the OEM and the end user, it was costing the OEM 4 to 10% of the value of the transmission for warranty cost. So we eliminated that pain point for the OEM. And more importantly, we made their users happy because they didn't have to change that. The other things that we came up with, obviously the features of anti-cogging and speed and more power to the deck, help the OEM sell more vehicles. But I agree with John. You got to get to the lowest level. You've got to create value, and you got to solve problems or pain points.
Yeah, honestly, the best innovations start with what the issue is, instead of just being I just want to make something new. Reinventing the wheel makes sense if the wheel isn't as efficient as it could be. So,
well, we always, just to add on to you, Clayton, we always said at Parker, we're not making keys looking for holes.
I like that. That's really good. Well, okay, so following up on that, Steve, what's the? Well, actually, it's open up to either of you, but Steve, let's start with you. What's the process for evaluating and selecting the right approach during the development phase of an innovation? How do you balance functionality, efficiency, scalability, things of that nature?
Funny you should ask. I'd be prepared for that question, Clayton, and then I'll turn it over to John. How's that?
That works.
We used a winnovation process. So after the engineers and the commercial folks would come back, you go into a discovery stage one or an ideation, where you sit around the room now with business leaders, plant folks, supply chain folks, engineers, and sales folks as a team, and talk about that idea. Can we really solve these problems for the customer? So that's stage gate one. And if the answer is yes, you go to stage number two. Stage number two then is really a high level engineering discussion with your brightest engineers, called scoping. Is it technically feasible to do?
Okay.
Right? Is it technically feasible? If you pass gate two, you go to three. Now it comes to the business case. And in John's case, being the head honcho, is can we do it? How big is the market? How much money do I have to invest? What do the margins look like? And what's the impact to EBITDA and cash flow? If you pass that gate, you go to 4. That would be the development stage, and that's where you're going to spend some. At that, prior to that point, you've only spent money that you already have, right? You got the people working for you, so that's a sunk cost. You got some travel involved. You got a little pencil and paper together, but you haven't spent any money.
Gotcha.
So we call stage 4 the money gate, because I'm now going to start to develop the product. I'm going to design it, I'm going to prototype it, and I'm going to do some early testing. Does it really work, right? And I'm going to get some feedback. I'm going to get some examples out to some end users. Does it really, you partner with a couple end users early on and see if it really works. And then if you pass that gate, now you get into the testing and validation, high end and money, right? Because now you're putting prototypes of production equipment to make sure this thing will work during its duty cycle and life of the product. And then if you pass that cycle, you go to 6, which would be launch. And now you're releasing, and then you follow up the revenue, EBITDA, and all that. But the business team is involved from the very beginning and stays involved as you go through each process. But you can't pass 4 gates. You have to pass all gates in sequence before you launch the product. Very rigorous, very detailed. Meetings are very tense. I'm sure John has a lot of those where, he's questioning, am I really going to get, I've heard him in many board meetings. Come on, Steve, you're really going to get that money? Or is that just you're going to spend it and we're going to lose money? So I know the questions are difficult, but it's very good. So sorry for the lengthy answer there, Clayton.
No, you're fine. This definitely seems like a case where working backwards is not the way to go.
Well, that's how you get your idea. That's how you get the innovation or the unmet need, by working backwards. Then you got to put it through a rigorous process.
I got you.
Otherwise, you're going to be spending a lot of money that you can't solve, because every engineer says they can solve it, but can you really solve it for the right price? And
Right.
can we really afford to make it?
Right.
So all that stuff has to be answered and followed in a detailed process. Otherwise, you will fail completely and disappoint the OEM and the end user.
Well, you definitely don't want that. John?
Well, and in that process, you have to make sure that there's discipline for the different groups. So you can't let the accountants rule the day. You can't let the engineers, because they'll innovate to the point that they can't get it off the drawing board because they want to keep making changes. And at some point, you gotta fish or cut bait. You got to decide,
Right.
Are we going to do this thing or not? And there there's compromises that have to come, right?
Okay.
So maybe, maybe all the things that you want it to do, maybe they all can't be done at this time in the budget that you have for the project, because at the end of the day, there are lots of problems out there, but, asking someone to pay to solve a problem, is there's a point where people will endure, inefficiency, and then there's a point where people will pay to overcome, inefficiency to become more efficient. Right. And so, there's a balance there, because, if they just develop the product and it ends up costing so much more money for the end consumer that it becomes a deterrent for them to be able to sell the products to the end user, or they become too expensive, or they're just not cost efficient, then it's not going to benefit. The innovation's not going to benefit, and it's not going to move its way through. So you have to look at it on a 360-degree basis and make sure that you're going to get that. And look, there's CEOs of companies love to do new projects and spend money and do those things. That's why a good relationship at our companies comes between the CEO and the CFO. And the CFO's always the person kind of keeping score. Okay. And making sure that the company is what they commit to do is what they end up doing, and so that way it benefits the company overall, so that they can continue to make innovations for the future.
So, okay, you mentioned the balance portion. How do you go about balancing that? Because I feel like that would be very tricky to not step on the wrong person's toes. Because obviously you don't want to irritate anybody. You don't want to make somebody well, you don't want to, piss anybody off basically in the process because they might hold up another part of it or they might make something more difficult. How do you go about balancing all of the components?
Well, it's the same as what was already mentioned in that you got to have multiple parties involved in the situation. You can't just go to the engineers and say, look, here's a problem, we need you to fix it. You need the commercial people involved so that they're, setting like this is the pain threshold. Like this is how much, someone's willing to pay for this.
Okay.
This is like, and so they're keeping that piece to it. You need the supply chain people because maybe you need to develop a new material or you need, just like they had to come up with a new type of oil, that wasn't available. And so then now you got to bring another party in to help solve the problem, right? So you have to go to somebody else that has expertise to be able to do that and help you solve the problem, be able to draw that. So it takes a multifunctional group, that has, a very clear mandate on what they're being asked to execute to. And then, of course, you're always taking a gamble whenever you invest capital at a company. Sometimes there's more certainty around it, but it's always a gamble on whether it's going to pay off or not. Everybody always comes to the table with, I call it the field of dreams. If we build it, they will come, right?
Right.
That rarely works out, right? So, you got to make sure you have the customer understand, what the demand is, and it doesn't do any good to innovate something if there's no customer. And so one of the things that we look at when we buy a company is do they have good technology? Do they have some intellectual property with their products that they manufacture? And do they have existing customers for the products? Okay. Because sometimes, people will, wow you in a scenario where they're showing you some, really advanced product that they have and capability, but there's no customers for it. Okay. So it doesn't really have any benefit to the company if there's no customer.
Okay, well, so here's a question that I've got for both of you is, how do you know when you should apply for a patent? And then how do you know if a product or if a process is actually worth patenting?
That's a great question, Clayton. And I would say that just to add a little bit on to John, at the end of the day, you can't solve somebody's problem at all costs, right? Because you can run into big trouble. And at the end of the day, the general manager of a division, the CEO of the company, has to determine that, hey, I hear you, I've got all these feedbacks, but we're doing this or we're not doing it, right? Because there is no guarantee on anything. Sometimes it's instinct, sometimes it's trust. So, the general manager, the CEO of the company is going to make the call. So relative to patents, you're going to do that early on in the process before you launch, right? You got to protect yourself. And it's a bit interesting. I'm sure John is going to have some feedback in this area for sure, because there's really two ways to get patents. And we would always say you want to put a fence around your product. So just to go back to that turf example with zero turn radiuses, when we designed that piece, our competitor was smart enough that when you put these two products together, it takes a relief valve, and they patented where the relief valve was located, and so that was very difficult to now have some device, right? Because that relief valve was where a pump or the motor was going to fail. But fortunately, we worked through it. We fought hard against that patent, but we lost. But obviously, that was a utility patent. But there's design patents out there. And just to give you an example, you may already be aware of it, but I'm going to ask you, Clayton, because you're probably the most up-to-date guy here between the three of us. What did Sam Adams patent on the brewery other than beer? Not the process, but something associated with the beer, but not the product beer. What did they patent?
Their recipe, possibly, or if
Nope.
not that, would it be one of their pieces of equipment?
All right, I'm going to give you the answer. It's design
Overdue.
patent number 5699489, and it's the Sam Adams glass that you drink beer out of.
Oh,
So
yeah, that's
think of
right. The
that.
cut
So
in
if you
the
have a
bottom of
Sam
it, right?
Adams beer and you go to a place that has the Sam Adams glass, they have unique glass. They patented 4 features. Unique lip point to start with, the lip of the cup, because it gets your palate ready and gets the best taste of the beer. Second thing, the neck of it, right? Because it sustains the head of the beer. So you got that nice head that hits your lip before you sip it. The third thing they patented was the narrowness of the glass, because your hand is warm. So the beer's above the head, so the beer is staying cooler. And then they etched in the glass so that it creates the bubbles in the beer constantly. So what do you think about that? So
Man,
you put a fence around your product. Don't think narrow, think broad when you patent, because you want to make it difficult for someone. If somebody can copy something but then can't make it, you want to make it very difficult for them. But you want to patent processes that really truly are worthy of IP, patents that matter.
I,
I'll turn it to John.
I was going to say, before we jump to you, I do remember 2 things on that. I do remember the Sam Adams commercials and the ring being cut at the bottom, and them, I was like, I don't know, 7 or 8 when those were out. But I do remember that. My other question is, have you actually tested that between that and a regular beer glass?
I have, and I will say it works.
Okay. Well,
But
good
I
to
have
know.
to have another to check though.
Okay.
After the show.
Well, maybe after the show or something, we'll try to figure out we'll line up a tasting. But John, take it away, man. I'm sure I'd love to hear your view on the patents.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, there's a difference between having intellectual property and having a patent, and sometimes people, if it's really hypersensitive, they don't file a patent because they don't want anybody else to know exactly how it's done. And we run into a situation before. We owned Escort Radar and made radar detectors. And there are these people that they just sit and, they review all the patents as they're being filed. And when they think one has like momentum, then they will troll it, And so there's these patent trolls, and they'll get involved in it. And we had someone do that to us. They didn't even make radar detectors. It was just a law firm. And we ended up having to pay them $10 million just to get rid of it, like as a nuisance.
Oh my God.
Yeah. We had the technology. They weren't like debating that, but they had filed a lawsuit against us because we had filed the patent. They filed a patent that was similar but more restrictive, and it was granted to them, but it was actually our technology, and so then we're basically paying $10 million to get our technology back, from somebody.
That's insane.
Yeah. So, so like a lot of times you got to be careful. I mean, patents used to be more prevalent than they are today. And there's a lot of products, and this is one of the commercial issues that goes on between us and foreign countries. There's certain regions of the world that knock off all the different products. I mean, as soon as you come out with something, there's a knockoff available, and then the distribution is so wide. Now it's very challenging and very difficult to kind of protect yourself, against some of these. So you'll see a lot of people where it's cutting edge technology and different things. They'll try to be as broad as they can, and they'll try to be as high level as they can and still get the patent approved without going to too many details, because if you go into too many details into the patent, you could just be creating a roadmap for someone to rip off your technology. So, so it's definitely a delicate balance. I would say most of our companies, they may have some they may have some patent protections, and they surely do it at many of the companies. But what we really look for is if they have, some type of intellectual property, or they have some process differentiation, or some geographic proximity to the customer that really, drives value. And hopefully they have multiple of those, so that, it gives you more, capability to serve the customer because of the investments that you've already made, and that creates a barrier for entry for other people to come in. And that's, and that's a part of innovation as well, is, you're going to innovate, and, different industries are different, and even in the like medical, pharmaceutical industry, there's length of time between, when your formulation of the medicine, runs out. And so, and then there starts to become generic medicine that's available, and lowers the cost immensely, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, they're trying to recover the, sometimes, billions of dollars that they spend to develop a product. They have to recover that in the price that they pay. So people are always wondering, why do they got to charge so much? Is because some of these problems that are being solved, cost billions of dollars, of testing and all the rigor that's involved in order to be able to get those things across the finish line. And so they're trying to recover that in the price so that they can innovate for the next product, or technology down the road. So there's definitely a delicate balance between, how you patent a product and how you protect yourself. And then also, especially in America, the process also tries not to stifle innovation. So, you don't want to, give a monopoly to somebody over a broad, product, for example, like, the gestures on an iPhone, whether you zoom in or zoom out. And, those were pretty contentious when Google first came out with their devices, and Samsung with Apple on the patent. So
it is, man, it is wild to think about, like, going through and then like trying to better, make the lives easier of like a customer or somebody just in general, just on a daily basis, but just all of the rigmarole that you have to go through. And then it's like, okay, well, we did it. And it's like, well, now I have to worry about somebody ripping it off.
I mean, if you, right, I agree wholeheartedly with John, depending on the level of IP that you create. Once you disclose it, now it's documented. So, we would, as we go through the process, do a lot of work on the patent searches, right, to make sure that we're doing the right thing as well. So, well said, John. Thanks for the feedback there. Wholeheartedly agree.
So, okay, this is our last question before we run to closing thoughts. So, Steve, we'll kick it to you really quick. Can you share a time when an innovation didn't work out as planned?
Oh, multiple times. Yeah, multiple times.
Well, just one of them.
Well, I just, I'm not going to name the product just to protect, the customer base, but we had multiple failures where we, tooled up, created divisions. And again, we didn't have all the facts. We did it more on this market size was this large, and it was too emotional, and it got to a high level of the organization. And, some other disruptive technologies came in, and we were too close to it and ignored the signs that this was going to be a failure. So multiple times and big failures, but we survived and learned from it. So,
John, do you have any innovations or anything that you can think of that didn't work out as planned?
I think the majority of them don't work out. I think you end up with a lot of stuff on the drawing board. Right?
Okay.
It never makes it through the gated process. There's a lot of products that don't make it through some of the gates, right?
Okay.
And the first gate clears them out. It's kind of, think of it like a funnel, right?
Right.
And so, you can't start out with 4 items in the beginning gate if you want to end up with 4 items at the end. So you got to have more products. So there's always going to be things that don't make it. It could be that something's not ready now. Like the innovation isn't now. It's not not that it's not relevant. Not
Right.
that it's not. It's timing is very important.
Okay.
And if you develop technology that's not understood. Like think about Bluetooth in your car. Bluetooth's been around for a really, really long time, and I think there was a lot of people when it first came out thought like, what do I need this for?
Yeah.
Satellite radio. when satellite radio first came out, people were like, what do I need this for? I get radio for free. Like, why do I need a satellite radio? Now every car has satellite radio in it, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's just the right timing, can be the factor. Cost is a big, prohibitive factor. I mean, there's almost no problem that can't be solved with, engineering and, capability today. There's almost like nothing that can't be solved. It's just a matter of like, who's going to pay for it? How expensive, is it going to be to solve the problem or whatever it is? So there's a lot of, different, things that innovate. And I think that sometimes that frustrates people, especially the ones that are working on the project, because, they can do it, but do they need to do it? And
right.
So it's different, and whenever you're developing a product, you want to put as many features in the product as you can. But if you put all the features in the product now, then like, what are you going to do next year? What are you going to do the next year? So sometimes you gotta have like a roadmap, an innovation roadmap. And as features are coming out and as new technologies being developed, how do you roll those through? If the top of the line cars don't have distinctive features from the entry level cars, then why would you buy the top of the line cars, right? So the top of the line cars will start with like the innovation, like Cadillac, for example, with their super cruise control, right? It didn't, that technology exists. You can put it in any car. Why
right.
not put it in every car, right?
Right.
So it has to start somewhere because there's a cost to it. And so they put it in, so that you can innovate at a price point where, people are going to accept paying $6,000 extra for an option, where someone's not going to do that on the entry level car. That doesn't make sense.
For sure.
So, anyway, you got to think about it, but a lot of things end up on the drawing, in the drawing room, and never leave the drawing room for, various reasons. And I would say probably the majority of ideas, are there.
Well, let's dive into closing thoughts here really quick. Steve, we'll kick it to you, and then Sir John, you can take us home after that.
Sure.
All right, Steve.
Okay, Clayton, really closing thoughts is, when you think about innovation, it's a real way to grow the revenue of your company as well as grow the cash flow and EBITDA. If you come up with true innovation and if you follow the process, we would call it the winnovation process. As John alluded to, you've probably got to have 3 to 4 times the number of ideas that you want to come out the back end of that thing, just because not everything goes through. If everything went through, you'd be in big trouble because you'd be investing things that are not worthy. But we know over time that innovative companies survive. You got to continue to re-innovate yourself every cycle. So it's the right thing, and all the feedback that John and myself discussed all have merit. So thanks for including me in your session, Clayton.
Hey, anytime. Sir John, would you like to take us home?
Yeah, look, I first want to thank Steve for his time today and his time on the board of PVI. We're often bringing, people in that have a lot of experience, industrial experience, and relevant experience to come in and to work with our companies and with our CEOs and with our management teams to help them. Sometimes, people have a full career and they wonder, what am I going to do in retirement? And sitting on a board can be like a really good way to stay engaged and to get some new experiences. Bill Kruger is one of our board members. We worked together at Toyota. He spent most of his time in the auto industry, and the first board we put him on was a company that made glassware.
Oh, okay.
Because everybody's like, oh, you should put him in the auto business. Well, he's done that his whole life. He wants to do something a little different, and he wants to and so it's a great way to network and to meet new people and to have people like Steve and others that we have on our boards that really help us and our management teams to do a lot. Their backgrounds and their experience with their former employers also usually are very relevant to our companies, and sometimes they can be customers of our companies or vendors, and so it's very helpful. So I really appreciate all the support we get from all of our teams, and thanks for all of the knowledge that was shared today. on this kind of thought process. But, I completely agree with everything he said. Companies need to innovate. They need to be looking for opportunities to solve problems. And too many companies, and when we buy these smaller businesses that are less sophisticated, that's an area they struggle because they're small companies. They don't have a lot of resources. They don't have a lot of incremental teams of people, and so they have to choose where they spend their time and how they allocate resources very carefully. But if you don't innovate, then you can have the hottest product today, and then before long, because someone else innovates and you don't, you can find yourself on the wrong end of the technology spectrum, and you can be being faced with having things be obsolete. And so you got to have a good balance of allocating your capital and your resources to current production needs and the current issues in manufacturing and the current issues with customers and raw materials, and there's just a lot of challenge running an industrial business. But you also have to have resources dedicated to innovating your products for the future, and that makes a better business. And when we sell everything that we buy, and so you want to make sure that the companies are continuing to develop a pipeline of products that are going to excite the next owner of the business as well. And so it's got to be looked at from all those different fronts.
That's yeah. So I guess your main takeaways, at least for me on this episode, is don't forget the 6 gates, and each one is just as important as the last. Like John was just saying, innovation. If you don't stay on top of it, here today, gone tomorrow. And just remember to work with the customer. Remember working backwards, like Steve was walking us through earlier. It really does make a difference. So there's some knowledge for you today. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Thanks for joining us again for another episode of Executive Sessions. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel too. Share it, like it, comment on it. Tell us what you love. Tell us what you want to see more of. Reach out. I'll talk to you. And then also check us out on LinkedIn, Apple Music, and Spotify. We're always posting. Also, just want to say again, thank you so much to Mr. Steve Myers for taking time out of his busy schedule to be here, and Sir John Stewart. It's been so long, man. Hopefully you'll be back sooner.
Yeah, hopefully.
But thanks again, everybody. That'll do it here for us today. Join us next time when we discuss more about trends and developments in the industrial manufacturing space. I've been your host, Clayton Gullett, and we'll see you on the next one.